Welcome to the Deepak Saini Show.
He said he gon' huff and puff and blow my mind up. You meet the island girl, she might dirty wind up.
Welcome to the Deepak Saini Show. I'd like to thank J23 for the intro music. You can find a link to her music in the show description. My guest today is Elizabeth Bennett. Elizabeth is an award-winning retired school principal with a 35-plus year career in education. She's also known as the Teen Genie for her impactful contributions to students and communities. Transitioning to the corporate world, Elizabeth leverages her expertise to enhance organizational communication and influence. Elizabeth's journey exemplifies how educational skills can elevate organizational culture, fostering trust and positive change through courageous conversations, inspiring transformation one dialogue at a time. Elizabeth, welcome to the Deepak Saini Show.
Thanks, Deepak. It's great to be here.
So I always like to start off by asking, how did you get into the work you're doing? So maybe to go back as far as what made the decision to go into education and then that transition into the corporate world?
Oh, well, stepping into education, I think that happened when I was in grade 3. I really liked my phys ed teacher, and I thought that was interesting and exciting. And my other two wishes at that point in time were being a flight attendant or a police officer. And I didn't fit the height requirement for either one of those. So, I just sort of thought about it for a while, and then it just disappeared as I was going through school. And then it sort of showed up again when I was finishing high school. And I said to the guidance counselor that I wanted to step into education. So I went through the recreation route first. I did that for a couple of years. And then I did some work in leadership in community development. And then I got into education after that. So yeah, that's how it started.
Got it. And I have a number. I've never shared this with you before, but I have a number of my relatives who are in the education field as
cool.
well. So I'm just curious, what was your primary subject that you taught then?
It started in phys ed.
Okay.
And so I did that, and I had a minor in psychology. So it was a really good blend, because
Cool.
I thought at that point I would maybe go into sport education or being a sports psychologist, to travel around with big teams in the world. But, it shifted, because I was way more interested in kids that I was teaching and having fun with them, but also seeing the downside of what was going on with them too.
Sure. And then what was that sort of transition to the corporate world? How did that transpire?
Well, because I was seeing similar kinds of things. So in the education piece, looking at children and teenagers, because I absolutely love teenagers, and I love their piss and vinegar attitude and all that other fun stuff that,
You want to come hang out at my house then? You can deal with my
parents
piss and
typically are pulling their hair out about. And I love those things because they're a form of communication. But what I found was, bullying is rampant. Mental health concerns are through the roof. Social isolation, as wonderful as our cell phone is, it's a place of death of hopes and dreams, and in some cases, people taking their lives. And what I noticed was that similar things were showing up in workplaces. Bullying is rampant, mental health concerns, absenteeism is through the roof. People are just showing up at work. And we've heard this term in the past several years about quiet quitting, and I heard a different term called presentism, where people are just showing up. They're not doing a whole lot. But what happens with that is that people don't feel valued. They don't feel heard. They don't feel respected or listened to, and their opinions don't seem to matter. And, lots of bullying and harassment and so on. But, and so what happens with that is that ends up going home. But to go back to answering your question, if we don't have those conversations with our kids to help them understand how to be resilient, how to look at things differently, to, stand on your own 2 feet. You really do have a voice, even as a youngster and even as a teenager. And to be able to have those really powerful conversations to help them feel secure and safe and so on, then that's the difference that we will begin to see in our workplaces. Because if we don't have those conversations early, then they end up showing up how they did when they were in school, where they're not feeling, valued, or they're not feeling like they're incredibly resistant or so on. And what's happening with that from the workplace perspective, and we sometimes lose sight of this, is that those people who don't feel welcome or don't feel like they have a voice or that they're valued in their workplace, and they take that home. And one of two things can happen typically. The first one is that, their family is so excited to see them, and they love them up, and they have a good time, and they do really great things together. And so that inspires the person to go back to work to do their job and to get money so that they can continue to have a good life with their family. But here's the other thing that happens typically is that person who doesn't feel valued or so on goes home, and there's an increase in frustration, increase in anger, possibly domestic violence, an increase or a start into alcoholism or drug abuse or so on. And then that family is left in the wake of that. And then that person, trundles on back to work and does the same thing over and over again. And there's no disruption in that cycle. And so that's part of the conversation that I want to have in workplaces is several things, being able to help folks be in a different place and understand that even if they don't feel like their job is the most important, to value themselves in that space, to be able to do that so that their contribution begins to be different. And it opens up the lines of communication. And as well, to coach and to consult with managers and leaders and business owners as well, because sometimes they're in those places and they don't know to have the skills to lead. They're just,
Right.
Doing their job, and everybody's supposed to do their job, but there isn't a guide or a suggestion or an idea about how do you really manage people? How do you have those conversations to find out what's going on? And I'm not talking about them being, therapists, but to recognize people, to value them, because if you want your bottom line to increase and you want to be profitable, then you need to value the people who do the job.
Yeah, Elizabeth, you bring up so many points here I want to bring up. So really quick, just rewinding back a few minutes, and we might just call the episode of the show maybe. What would you say? Your cell phone is a device of death or something to that effect. That maybe we'll call that episode that. That might be too morbid. And then I just want to be perfectly clear with everyone. I love my girls. I don't have short hair because I'm pulling it out. I choose to keep it this short. So I digress. But no, you bring up an interesting point, because again, I came from the corporate world as well as many people know. And I look back, and again, this is some time ago. I've been out since 2018. I haven't worked in the corporate world. And I was certainly in management at the time. And I have to acknowledge, like, we got very little training, at least in mid-management, in, let's call it, people skills, or even like how to foster our own personal development so we can bring our best self to our team as a leader. And I'm hoping that's getting better, but from my limited experience of the people I still are in contact with that are in the corporate role in management roles, it doesn't seem like that's really happening, at least where I live. But you talk a lot about understanding versus judgment. What does that mean exactly?
Well, we're really good as adults to be able to have solutions for things. So if I'm having a conversation with you, I'm already thinking about the 5 or 6 things that I could tell you to help support you in making that change, rather than putting my judgment aside and shutting down those solutions for the moment and really understanding you and being curiously engaged to find out what's going on underneath that. Because sometimes how you respond or you react is different than what's really going on. And so to have that conversation, to inquire as to, tell me a little bit more about when you said this, or, you made this comment, or I'm noticing that, and those are sentence openers or sentence expanders, to be able to really understand what's going on with you. And again, it's not about therapy, but it's about connection, and it's about relationship and being able to, be connected with each other. in a
Well,
work.
Elizabeth, what I'm hearing you say is really it's about listening, right? Like we have
Absolutely.
two ears for and one mouth for a reason. We're supposed to listen twice as much as we talk, right? So it's really about empathetic listening.
Right.
You can maybe pull on that string a little bit. Like
Well,
how do we develop this as adults or as team leaders in our businesses?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that question because oftentimes what will show up with people and they'll say, well, I don't care about how that person feels or so on. Well, it, you ought to because it helps to establish the relationship. And not only that, but it really is about trust and it's about connection with each other. And it's about, the strength of a team when you're working towards a common goal. I mean, if you're the manager and you're the only one that's doing the work, then, that's not the most productive or the most engaging. And so what we need to do is this is a place of invitation as it is as well when we have conversation with our partner or our spouse, our children, neighbors, friends, community people. This is about an invitation to have conversation so that people engage and they understand each other. And then that makes for a more powerful foundation in order to establish relationship in your workplace. And when people feel that connection, and I'm talking about an authentic connection, not one, well, hi, how's it going? And, or we put people off in our own minds and say, oh, well, that's just what they're like. And when we don't bring them in and we don't invite them in, then there's always that gap that exists. And the same thing is showing up in families where, that there's an enormous chasm between how each of those people are feeling and what they want to say and how they want to connect with each other. And I try to be that, to bridge that gap so that there's a new opening, a new thought about engagement.
Right. I love that. And you also have a term, reflective acknowledgement. I'm not, that's the first time I've kind of heard those two words put together in that way. So I'd love for you to share with the audience, like, what do you mean by that term?
Really, it's about reflecting on where you are. So in a conversation that you and I are having, I'm reflecting about where I am and what I've said and so on. And I'm also taking the time to be reflective into the things that you've said. And so that reflection and that acknowledgement really is about acknowledging you for sharing and for being with me in this particular conversation. Now, I use that term as well with parents and having those conversations with kids, because typically that will be a space where someone shares something that is that takes a lot of courage for them to share. And maybe sometimes in workplaces, that's beginning to happen a little bit more too. I mean, they're not necessarily pouring out their soul, but in some cases that happens because we have so many things going on. And it's a place where we're reflecting on what the person has said to us and being able to acknowledge them for the courage and the bravery it takes to share that. Because oftentimes people carry these enormous weights on their shoulder. It could be, the sandwich generation. They're caring for an elderly parent, or something is going on with their child, or, there's been a death in the family or so on. And you're carrying all that stuff by yourself. And that sometimes gets in the way. But it's also a place of being able to say, hey, this is what's going on. And and because people don't often have the courage to ask for help. And so they're muddling in that all by themselves. And so when you do take the time to share something and say, this is what's going on, then that's a place where we have to honor them for that bravery and that courage to share.
Yeah, I want to just take this one step further. I guess both as a parent, a leader of the household, or in a leadership role in your business or corporation or what have you. The term, I think we're semantics here, but like I think what you're saying is, or the way I'm interpreting is holding space for when
Right.
the person is ready. Because I'll just use my own kids. Like, how was your day at school? Like, oh, fine. I don't want to talk about it, blah blah blah. And then when you finally get them in the car, or like maybe you're taking the dog for a walk, or whatever the case, and then all of a sudden it's like, this all happened, and like it's easy to sort of dismiss because we have our own things going on both in the home or the workplace, but to like hold that space, now they're ready, and to make that, have, again, using empathetic listening and the reflective acknowledgement that we just talked about, et cetera, so that you can actually build and foster a relationship and they know you're hearing them, and et cetera. So that's kind of my take on it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And the other piece, it's interesting that you asked that question about how was your day, because oftentimes with parents, I say that, that's great that you want to know about their day, but they've already been in that day for 7 or 8 hours. They've, been in classes together with people. They've probably heard or seen things or been part of, the challenges of being a student and trying to have your own sort of community and growing and trying to figure it all out. And I say to parents, yes, it's a great question, but what your kids are really waiting for you to ask is, how are you in this day? Because when they come home and they throw their backpack down and they put their stuff away and so on, they want to get away from that day. Now, whether it was a good day or not, or anywhere in between, they want to be rid of that day. So they're looking for you to ask, how are you? How was it for you today? Tell me something great that happened, or tell me something that, made you shake your head or, roll, because girls are really good at this, the big eye roll thing. And so,
oh yeah, my girls have that down. My girls have that down.
I think they, I think by the time they get to grade 7 and 8, they've mastered it because they've been practicing since they were in grade 2,
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that. And I think everyone can, again, whether you're a parent or you're a leader in the corporate world, or run your own business, or not, or you're like just an employee, or I'm going to rephrase. If you're part of society, these are important skills and important concepts. So, Elizabeth, obviously, I'm all about health and all that, but this is not a health podcast. But I do like to kind of slowly wind down the episode with talking about, like, what does your morning routine look like, or what's a health non-negotiable for you?
Oh, getting outside. I mean, really, I'd really love to be beside the ocean because that's my favorite place in the world. But right now it's, getting outside, and I have the luxury of having a lovely dog. And so, we often go for walks, and just when I'm out there, I'm grateful for what I see, and, whether there are berries on trees, or, whether someone has decorated the outside of their home to be attractive and inviting it, so I'm grateful when I'm wherever I am.
Love that. If there was one, it could be health related or not. If there was one, tip you wish if you could go back in time, and your 20-year-old self, or some earlier period, that you could, like, give yourself some advice, what would it be?
Oh, to take more risks.
Oh,
Yeah, to get out there and just do it.
awesome.
I probably should have coined the phrase for Nike to help them out,
Oh, you'd be very, very wealthy now, I think, if that was the case. Awesome. Elizabeth, you have a couple of gifts for the listeners. I'd love for you to just describe what those are.
Sure. I have 2 gifts, and their title is relatively close. One of them is 5 strategies for dedicated listening for families and for parents. And the other one is 5 strategies of dedicated listening in the workplace. So these are skills that are helpful for families, or for managers or employees, to be able to step into having conversations that matter, to stepping into conversations with courage.
I love that. And we're going to have those links in the show notes, as well as Elizabeth's other links. You can connect with her on social and her, website, and all that. So all the links will be there in the show notes for those guys. And definitely grab them. If you're a parent, I'm gonna grab the parent one for sure. If you're a parent, you're in management, you're leading teams, you own the company, whatever. This is a great resource for you to grab. Elizabeth, any last words of wisdom or golden nugget, if you will, that you'd love to leave for the audience today?
Well, it is about stepping into your conversations with courage, because we need to be connected. I mean, that's in our DNA. This isn't something that we just talk about lightly. This is a place where relationship and connection and having the courage to open up to people and to invite them into connection with you is really critical. And we need it because, in this world right now, we're incredibly positional, and we need to be able to take that time to listen, to understand, so that, because we all want the same thing. We all want good healthcare. We all want good education for our children. We all want changes in the world to make us more connected. But we need to be the ones that disrupt what's going on and to be that courage that we want to see.
I love that. I think that's a great place to leave off for today. So before I throw it to J23, who's going to play us out with some music, I want to just remind everyone, don't forget to check out today's sponsor, and also check out Elizabeth's links in the show notes. And also check out, I have some new resources that I put in the show notes as well. I have a couple new resources for all of you, so check those out as well. Elizabeth, I want to thank you again for being a guest on the Deepak Saini Show.
Thanks, Deepak.
All right. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to the show. And remember, exceptional results for the exceptional you. Till next episode. This episode is brought to you by Optimizers. I love their product, Gluten Guardian. Now, I'm not celiac, but I am sensitive to gluten. And, sometimes you just can't avoid it. You're out. Sometimes you just want to celebrate that, birthday cake that your kids made, what have you. So I'll pop a couple of these pills just to help mitigate the inflammation and help break down the gluten that I may ingest sometimes. So Gluten Guardian also works with dairy as well. I take these occasionally, and click the link and you can save 10% off at least, if not more. Cheers.
Podcast produced by the Minted Green Company